Peter is a Gold Institute fellow who focuses on energy policy. And Peter, as I discussed with Congressman Barton, this is the Chairman Barton. This is something that you and I were talking about yesterday, and maybe you have a couple minutes of thoughts on energy policy development. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Ellie. Eli, this has really been a very good conversation, Congressman. Uh, Thoroughly enjoyed your remarks and agree with them. Um, what I see happening here is the global warming people have run out of some steam. You had Bill Gates, who wants to go off and um, build data centers. He needs electricity for that, and that walking into a zero carbon business, that's not good. That's not going to work. So he kind of came down off of his "we're all going to die" perch and said, well, it's not as bad as you think. So we did that. And then you have, on the other hand, Mr. Gore and the United Nations. They came out and said the most extreme uh, scenario that the IPCC had, we're going to basically delete that or modify it. And that was interpreted by many in the media to mean that they had decided that global warming wasn't a serious problem, when in fact, all they did was adjust a scenario that was completely um, mindless. It had no basis in fact. And so they basically said, instead of being really, really stupid, we'll just be stupid. And so that unfortunately has given people the sense that the IPCC folks are a little bit more reasonable than they are. I have to tell you that my background in this goes way, way back to 1972 with the formation of the UN Environment Program. And my boss at the time, I was an intern there while going to graduate school and law school at Columbia. The UN Environment Program liaison office was in New York City on Lexington Avenue, and the founder of the UNEP was Maurice Strong, who was head president and chairman of the board of Petro-Canada, a multimillionaire in his own right. And he was the one who created the IPCC and thought that the UNEP at the UN would be like the European Union, but for the world, and be basically control energy and with controlling energy, controlling economic development. And he has been, he's passed on now, but he has been probably the driving force behind much of the global warming, which became, you couldn't connect an increase in temperature in the world and any kind of climate change. So they just made it climate change in general, as opposed to taking a 1% increase in temperatures around the globe and then connecting that to some kind of hurricanes and so forth. So that's where this climate change came in. And it is true, during the 1970s, about a third of all the research was not on global warming, but on the coming ice age, popularized by Carl Sagan, who postulated that, and this was aimed at President Reagan, saying that Reagan was in the business of thinking you could use a small number of nuclear weapons in the real world and get away with it and not have grave harm. And he said even a couple dozen nuclear weapons would put so much soot into the air that it would block the sunlight from getting to the earth, and we would have global winter. And he called it nuclear winter. And that was basically to beat up on the president's nuclear modernization program, which, you know, Ellie, I spent a lot of time doing as well. So it was interesting that most of the research in the 70s was on global warming. That's where the money came from, and particularly the Department of Energy, and some money from EPA, relatively little from the Interior Department, where I helped. I was senior advisor to the Secretary of the Interior, Cecil Andrus, who wonderful, wonderful man. And everything we tried to do to promote and increase energy production, the Carter White House put a kibosh on, particularly the Sierra Club. And then, as you know, Amory Lovins, who's head of the Rocky Mountain Institute, during that period of time was postulating that we didn't need more than what he claimed it's 60 joules of energy, which is what we were using. He said by the year 2000, we don't need any more than that. And as you know, Ellie, that we're somewhere around 100, I think 120 joules of energy is what the United States, and we're much more efficient in using energy, but our GDP has gone up so dramatically is that we absolutely need the energy. And particularly, everybody talks about gasoline, but electricity is not necessarily, they're not the same. Liquid fuels for automobiles, trucks, and airplanes. We're not going to electrify much more than a certain percent of the automobile fleet. Though Elon Musk, God love him, says that he's working on an 18-wheeler. The last one I looked at was $750,000 that was electric. And think
Yeah,
about
I
a
think,
company
Peter, I think
trying to buy
also,
that one.
yeah, I think the issue, of course, behind besides the funding, besides the the cost, of course, is the weight of an 18
Yes,
wheeler, and what that would do to our roads. That's always a problem.
true,
But
because batteries are the heaviest part of a car.
exactly. So if we take a look, if we can just because of timing, we have several more
Sure.
speakers. Can you fast forward to today? And let's talk about energy policy. This is going to be something that you and I and several of our colleagues, Chairman Joe Barton, Congressman Trent
Right,
Franks, and several others are going to be focused heavily over the next several months
right.
on energy policy. Can you fast forward to today and
Yes.
give us your thoughts?
I think the biggest hurdle we have is promoting nuclear energy and getting the building of the things done in a timely manner. Originally, you could do them in 20 months, 25 months, and they got up as long as 100 months because they were making changes in the midst of construction, saying that, oh, we found these new safety rules. And what it was designed was they basically killed nuclear energy in America. It's not dead, but it the small modular reactors is a great idea. My understanding is Britain has produced three of them and on commercial ships to be offshore. One of them, I have been told, has been purchased by the United States to be off of Norfolk. I think that is to supply energy to the military base there. I think that's a great idea. Number one. Number two, natural gas, as the congressman said, we're producing more in the Permian Basin than we were previously. I know there's comments that fracking is good at $70 a barrel, but not good at 40 or $50 a barrel. And I think that may affect investment in Wall Street, but I think on natural gas, that's our lifeblood. I'm always willing to look at clean coal technology. The Pearson Peck process that was developed way back in the 1970s, EPA just simply won't approve. And it's a flue gas desulfurization. I still think the coal industry has something to offer us. Geothermal is extraordinarily. We used to think, well, if there's an old faithful, okay, you can use that. But now you can drill so many miles down into the crust of the earth, and it's basically the crust is so hot that basically you're boiling water, you're making steam. And I've heard a lot of people, including our dear friend Trent Franks, is saying that that is a real possibility. And the other thing is our seismic capability is that we're finding oil that we never thought existed around the world. The question is, can you get it out and at what kind of rate and how long can the production be? I think that's very good. Solar is working as a cheap electricity alternative because of batteries and because it has a backup called natural gas. You can't do solar without the batteries, and you can't do it without the backup. It can be natural gas, can be coal, be any kind of electricity, but you have to have a backup because the batteries aren't sufficient to provide us enough electricity without the backup. So I think the good news is the president is in favor of all of this. The bad news is if there's a flip in Congress, my worry is not only the regulatory effort there, but also the courts are going to be asked by a lot of our opponents of this energy we're developing to go in and stop such development. The biggest thing is Mr. Obama's endangerment finding, which was basically any coal or natural gas or fossil fuel burning was going to create global warming, and we were all going to, with Greta, listening to Greta Thunberg, we were all going to die tomorrow. The glaciers were going to, and the polar bears were all going to go away. So, Ellie, that is still going to be, this is a multi-trillion dollar industry on global warming. So I don't see it going away, but I think the congressman is right that it is, I hope it's as Churchill would say, it's the end of the beginning, but it is the beginning and we're getting there.